Right, very welcome, Mr. Preus again. You become a household name on my economic series. It's fortunate that we have somebody with a vast economic outlook and interest about different countries and the economies, and then also and the trends and where the economic trends and political associated with it is also and developing in this very fast-moving world. So today it's now just a little bit more than a week since the South African elections. The elections are out, and we know the coalition government discussions are ongoing to be finalized within the next 2 weeks. So it's exciting times for Namibia and East Namibia, or for South Africa and Namibia, and you are returning to South Africa. Can you provide us some outlook about, if it's possible, about the South African economy, given what happened in South Africa with the elections? Because it always have a profound impact on Namibia, where our economy is about, I think, 0.03%.
Somewhere in that region
of your GDP. I mean, it's not even, we can't even say 1%. It is, it's not even a drop of 100 drops. That's why.
An easy way of looking at it is you 3 million people, we're 62 million. So that's a kind of comparison. So at least 20 times your size.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So if you can give us some economic outlook, what can we expect?
Okay. So
current situation, or what can be expected? Yeah.
Currently, there are coalition negotiations continuing.
Yeah.
There are three possible permutations. The first one is a government of national unity, the same thing that happened from 1994 through to 1996.
Yeah.
We had the ANC was there as the head of government, Nelson Mandela, but the deputy president was F.W. de Klerk at this stage. So it was a three-way coalition between the ANC, the National Party, and the IFP. The Democratic Party at that election had barely 1%, so they weren't included in the government of national unity. So this time around, we could have a similar situation, except this time there is no national party involved. It is the Democratic Alliance that is involved, and the IFP. So that would be a government of national unity, and that would have in excess of a 2/3 majority in terms of that. The second permutation is what's called as sort of cooperative governments. So it is a minority government with the ANC there, and they would determine all the ministries, and the DA would support them on major issues except for where there's non-negotiable. So expropriation without compensation, the DA would oppose that.
Yeah.
The national health insurance bill would also be opposed. But the DA doesn't necessarily have to oppose that in Parliament, because it would go to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court in both cases, I think, would rule against it because it's not aligned with the Constitution.
Okay.
And the third option would be what the Democratic Alliance calls the Doomsday Coalition, and that would be a coalition between the ANC, the Economic Freedom Fighters, and the Patriotic Alliance. And that would be much more left-leaning, and as I said, in terms of the rule of law, it would involve nationalization of the mines. It would involve expropriation without compensation, and that's against the rule of law, and that would frighten off foreign capital and local capital as well. Nobody wants to invest if there's a likelihood that their property will be taken without compensation.
Yeah. The possible coalition between the DA and the ANC, is it it's not part of the cooperative?
No, that's not so a cooperative. You have a minority government.
Yeah.
It's not a coalition.
Yeah.
So all the cabinet posts would be done by the ANC. They could ask some minority parties to have one or two posts, as you had in the last one, where you had Patricia de Lille, who's not an ANC member, had a cabinet post.
Okay. You said the DA alliance with the EFF and Patriotic Alliance.
Yeah, that's the ANC.
Yeah.
There.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
the ANC. Definitely.
Yeah.
Included there.
Yeah, that's what's called the Doomsday Coalition.
Okay. But you haven't mentioned the MK, or did you?
No, there's too much bad blood between the ANC and the MK. I don't think that's on being seriously considered by either party.
Would you allow to put your weight on the block by providing any probability indicators to any of the options and some assumptions linked to that or associated with that?
All right. I would say the probability of the coalition, the government of national unity, and the cooperative one, they're about equal weight, 40% each, and then the Doomsday Coalition would be 20%.
And that's the one that will damage South Africa economically from a investment point of view the most.
Yes. So you'd have an immediate exodus of any foreign capital, and there would be no further investment in terms from foreigners. And apart from the renewable energies that's already baked in, and state corporations in terms of Transnet, there would be very little investment in mining or manufacturing.
There are already substantial amount of money put on hold by investors.
Yes.
And for how long do you think it will take since the announcement of say either a unity government or a alliance between the cooperative government? How long will it take to unfreeze some of that?
Well, if we have a government of national unity and the Democratic Alliance gets the portfolio of mining, I think within 6 months you will have a tremendous unfreezing of exploratory licenses, which at backlog is considered as close to 5,000 licenses that's waiting finalization.
Sure.
But once you've got the license, you then still have to get the finances, etc. So the impact in terms of that, the actual projects moving there, will only probably be felt in 2026. What it will do now is the renewable energy parts, they are ongoing. That will just be accelerated. So we have a bid window 7 that's due to be released. That hasn't been released yet, but once we have that, that will, and we have bid windows 5 and 6 that are ongoing. So those will continue and drive gross fixed and capital formation.
Okay. The if we look at the Eskom and the no load shedding, and also the substantial investment in the last few years in the renewables, given also I think information that you sent to me about the renewables, 2022 12 times I think more than 2021 investment, and 23 double. 2022, it seems that the private sector have taken the initiative on to regardless of Eskom, make provision for renewable energy. And to what extent, even if South Africa fall back now to load shedding, it will probably not be to the same extent. prior to a year ago.
Correct. So what it does is what's called embedded generation. So what you're doing is you creating power for your own purposes, not for selling to anybody else. That obviously generates. So Goldfields have a 30 megawatt plant at South Deep, and that reduces their requirement in terms of Eskom by roughly 80%. A lot of that will continue going forward, but what would really help is if we can get wheeling and feed-in tariffs going, and that's likely to happen under if we have a Democratic Alliance Ministry of Mines or Electricity.
Yeah, where people can benefit from. So
it's
feedback, excess electricity back into the grid.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that will work for this year and for next year. Beyond that, however, we need to look at transmission and saying, all right, how do we move that excess electricity from the Northern Cape to Gauteng? And that's where there's going to be a constraint. And they are moving in terms of separating Eskom into 3 separate companies, but everything takes time, and we still haven't got the money. Without money, nothing happens.
The movement into or breaking it up in 3 separate entities with increasing private sector involvement, given the systemic corruption in South Africa, will it benefit more the public than currently? How do you, if one can compare the situation?
It will definitely benefit the public, and in 5 years' time, your electricity tariffs to certain people will be below inflation, whereas over the last 10 years, electricity tariff increases have been above inflation. So that will benefit because there's more competition.
Yeah. To what extent, if you know, is the current electricity units that you pay per 1 kilowatt, what is it?
One kilowatt hour,
is overinflated, or in terms, would you actually pay for inefficiency of Eskom? Put it that way.
Yeah, and if maybe even as much as 50%. And if you go back to 2009, I've got the proposed completion dates for Medupi, Kusile, and Ngula, which were the 3 major projects. They should have all been finished by 2012. And we're still not there. It's more than 12 years later. Yeah. And while so there's a dual impact. If you building something and it takes you longer than you expected, that means you get your revenue later than expected. So if Eskom had got their revenue starting in 2011 and 12 from Kusile and Ngula and Medupi, then they wouldn't have had to have the tariff increases in order to fund the delays in the capital projects.
Yes.
So, as I say, I couldn't quite easily have foreseen if they had completed those projects on time and on budget, both of them being requirements, then electricity tariffs would be 50% lower than they are currently. So it is a major impact.
Okay. Yeah, again, we are focusing a little bit on electricity because I think it's got a profound impact.
Yes,
on the economy of South Africa.
Without a doubt, over the last 5 years, the biggest constraint on the South African economy has been load shedding. Without a doubt.
If you can just briefly explain, except for the Minister of Electricity, sounds so strange to have Minister of Electricity, but except for him, what has been done to address this load shedding problem in such a short period of time? That's quite amazing.
All right. So it really started in May last year. So it's not that short, if you really look at it.
Okay.
But the focus, and that already started under Andre de Ruyter, was to make sure that you did your maintenance properly. But in order to do your maintenance properly, you have to take units out of commission in order to fix them.
Yes.
And when you do that, you have a shortage of capacity, which leads to load shedding. So the benchmark in terms of this was to say, all right, May last year, we want to show a trend line improvement since then. And they put a lot of effort, especially in terms of plant maintenance, from round about October there, because you got more units coming on stream from Kusile and Medupi, which should have been 10 years ago, but nevertheless they are now providing 800 megawatts each. So those are substantial increases. So, and the shortfall in most cases was only 2,000 megawatts. So three units of 800 megawatts, that eliminates your load shedding problem. And then you can focus on getting your older units having proper maintenance. So if you look at how much planned maintenance over in week 52, for instance, was in excess of 19% of their total capacity. And then, so almost one in 5 units were out on planned maintenance. Now that that's dropped now to the 8% level, and over June and July, which are your winter months, and to a certain extent August, drops down further to 5%, and then September starts ramping up. So they have had that, and it is a focus, but it's, as I said, it didn't happen overnight. But we are thankful that since late March, we've had no load shedding, so we are running at 70 days without load shedding.
And electricity and the supply of that on a what do you call it, not an undisturbed basis, but on a frequent basis, could also impact on delivery of water, supply of water. I think that was exactly one of the big problems as well.
Correct.
In the local communities, except that they don't pay, but they are also disillusioned by have been disillusioned by the service not provided. To what extent do you think that will also improve?
It's the same thing that you had to have solved in terms of Eskom. And the problem in terms of the water is that's much more distributed. So, yes, you've had problems that ultimately it was municipalities that supplied homes and businesses with electricity. Water is a bit more complicated in terms of that, because your pipes are underground and you have burst pipes, whether at St. Paul's like here in Windhoek, and they can burst at any times. And to try and replace sort of pipes that are now 50 years old, that's a major undertaking. So the water problem is a more enduring problem rather than electricity.
No, that makes sense. And I think you mentioned in the previous video, but you can just refresh my memory, the fact that Eskom did have load shedding. If there is a figure or estimate, what impact did it actually have on the South African economy in terms of GDP? I think you mentioned it once.
And the Reserve Bank and a lot of other people estimate that the impact is at least 1 billion per day, depending on what stage of load shedding. So stage 1 and 2, where you've got 1 hour, 2 hours of every, say, 8 hours. So during the night, shops are not open. So load shedding at 2 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't impact. But if that happens at noon to 2 o'clock, that has a major impact. But if it's only 2 hours, you can get around it because you've got inverters, you've got battery backup in terms of that, or you just shut down for those 2 hours and then work around. Once it goes beyond stage 2, then you have the major impact, and it's at least 1 billion at a stage 3, and it will move up to 4 billion per day on a stage 6. Where you've got 8 hours of load shedding.
So, big numbers. For Namibia, it's incredible.
So the estimates are between 2 and 4% of GDP growth.
To what extent does the electricity problem also contribute to the logistical problem and to the harbors, or is it a completely separate problem?
It's mostly a separate problem. The big problem in terms of the logistics was a lack of locomotives. So we bought a lot of locomotives from Chinese, and then there was a dispute saying it was state capture, there was corruption, and then the Chinese refused to supply the spare parts. It's ongoing in terms of high level, and Transnet have got more. So what they're doing is now saying, right, other companies supply the spares so that we get the locomotives going. So that's in a way, has nothing to do with electricity. And ports, it is a similar kind of thing. They didn't have the cranes, the haulers to move things, and that they are being re-equipped as we speak. So the two are not linked, and both are in locomotives are returning to service, and we are getting more haulers and cranes, so that we have more capacity in terms of and training. A lot of it is also training, and that's certainly also with Eskom. The German looked at how did the people know what they were doing, because one of the units that was taken out a month after it being commercial operation, the operator did something wrong, and a generator exploded.
So,
they hadn't been trained properly.
Yeah, if I may ask, what was the reason provided, if any, by China for not providing spare parts?
It's money, so it's a contractual one.
Okay.
And we're talking at least $1 billion that's in dispute. So you don't settle easily when it's those large sums of money.
Yeah. Okay. Then so we have mentioned electricity, and we've mentioned water, and also the different options in terms of the coalition. In terms of moving forward, I know a lot of been associated with the outcome of the next 2 weeks. But how would you state the situation regarding the policy of the Reserve Bank? Do you see it as quite stable at the moment, or do you see any changes there?
No, I don't see any changes there, and depending on the mood, I think the Reserve Bank will come to the party, and they will cut interest rates probably in September, and then again in November.
Okay.
That's my feeling at the moment. But if there's a change in terms of positiveness, that will be reflected in the rand. So that's your barometer of public perception as to whether it's good to invest in South Africa or bad.
Yeah. The judicial system, the independence of the judicial system, any changes that you foresee there? Because currently it is quite, it's got a track record of some credibility.
Yeah. So if, for instance, the Democratic Alliance was given the justice portfolio, then I would see far better resources and prosecution of those people identified in terms of the Zondo Commission and other things. So, the BBS mutual bank looting, the perpetrators of that will be brought to book. There will be lot more, but it requires money and better resources. And if we have a government of national unity, I'm sure that will be a major focus, and you will then, in the space of the next 6 months or so, you will see a lot of corruption trials. And remember, Jacob Zuma is still facing a corruption trial.
Yeah.
That's completely independent of who wins the coalition.
That's right. Any other indicators, except the rule of law, that we have mentioned that may play a substantial role? The Reserve Bank, the electricity, the water, that you think will have a major impact on the South African economy for the few years or next years to come?
Well, and the ones that you get on a monthly basis that gives an indication is the survey, the PMIs. So the BER produces one, and S&P Global produces one that's broader. So those get reported on a monthly basis. So you watch out for that. The last one went below 50, but that was due to uncertainty about the election outcome. I'm sure once we have some sort of finality in terms of coalition, there should be a bounce back. And then the other ones that I look at is the BER also does a business confidence indicator, which is quarterly, and the Potchefstroom University does the policy uncertainty index, which is also a quarterly one. So those are ones that I look at to try and gauge mood. But on a daily basis, you just watch the rand.
Yeah. And these indicators play an important role as well as for investors, I suppose. Yeah. For which you also provide advice.
Yes.
Yeah. And from American perspective, how important is the South African economy in terms of Africa as one of the biggest economies for the American influence or interest in the resources in Africa?
For the Americans, in terms of resources, it's not that big an issue because America has its own resources in terms of copper and iron ore and things like that.
Yeah,
it's more a focus for the Americans on looking at Central Africa, so the DRC and Zambia, especially for cobalt, and then Nigeria in terms of oil. So that's of more interest to the Americans than South Africa per se.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen Shell is probably moving, although I think they haven't made an announcement yet.
They've made
an official announcement.
Yeah. So what's happening now is to see who takes over from Shell, and there's certain Middle Eastern companies looking at
probably at the reduced share price.
It's not really a share transaction. It says, all right, we've got 600 here. We're going to rebrand them.
Yes.
What are we going to pay for them? Yeah. So but it doesn't really impact their share price.
Yeah, and Paribas and Rolex also are moving out of South Africa. Will that have any profound impact?
No, not really. Paribas, since March this year, has not reported to the South African Reserve Bank. The banking license has already been withdrawn.
Okay.
Rolex, There are other watches that you can wear instead of Rolex. You can wear your Breitlings or whatever you want to there. So that's not a big deal.
Yeah. Okay. Now we are living in very exciting times with the coalition government the next 2 weeks, and we've looked at water and electricity and logistics and some of the other indicators that you mentioned, PMI, S&P, you mentioned?
Is S&P Global?
S&P, and then also PCI index and the policy uncertainty index of Potchefstroom University.
They called now the Northwest University.
Northwest, yes, yeah. Put it correct. Thank you very much. And so you foresee that things will definitely either the probability then is that the economy of South Africa will improve, given the last 5 years are greater than it, that it will remain the same, or?
Yeah, no, I'm very much an optimist. Last year we had growth of only 0.7, which is roughly half of what population growth was. So this year, a lot of people looking at 0.9%. Official forecast is 1.3%. I'm an optimist. If there's a government of national unity, we should achieve 2.1%. Once you get the growth momentum going, then people will invest more, and so it then creates its own growth momentum. So by 2026, we could be growing back at the 5% level.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much to move out of that.
To ask you and conclude with a very basic question, which are the sectors that have the biggest that are the biggest contributors towards the gross domestic product in South Africa, except for mining?
All right. So the biggest contributor is finance. That's the single biggest sector. And once you have things going, then your renewables have to be financed. Your expansion of your ports and the locomotives, they all have to be financed. The transmission grid has to be financed.
Yes.
And so they will have spillover effects.
Okay.
And once that happens, then construction improves and manufacturing of the components of the renewable has to improve as well. So, and as I said, once you get the growth momentum going, then to move from 0.7 to 5% is a matter of 3 years. It doesn't take that long.
What is the last ballpark figure about the gross domestic product of South Africa? The last few months or the last year? That's
last year we only had 0.7% growth.
Okay, zero.
Yeah.
Okay. But in terms of the total GDP?
Total GDP, we're looking at, in rand terms, around about 7 trillion.
7 trillion?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but that's off the top of my head.
Yeah, that explains where we are.
No.
0.0 or less.
Yeah.
In the South African economy. Any final words, Mr. Preus? Thank you very much.
No, just as I say, I'm an optimist. So I expect growth to improve going forward from this point, and there are indications that growth will improve almost irrespective of what type of government we will have.
Yeah. So on this positive note, thank you once again. Positive South African note, and he will come back to Namibia in 3 years' time.
In 3 years' time.
So we will see to what extent he was completely incorrect.
All right.